Hey guys, Salt here. Today we're going to be going over the Kuva Nukor. In this video series, I like to take a weapon, I build it out, and I test that weapon on its own merits, meaning I don't mix it with any kind of Warframe abilities, Warframe damage, pet abilities, pet damage, or pet statuses, anything like that. I just test the weapon on its own merits. Now, this is actually the second video I'm going to be doing for the Kuva Nukor, only because the first video I had it uploaded, and then someone commented. It was one of the commenters, Mike D. He mentioned something important that I had misspoke on one of the mods, and actually one of the mods that are very strong on the Kuva Nukor. And so I thought it was important for me to remake this video. That way there was no confusion about that. So I do apologize for it, and I do thank him for letting me know. Okay, so gonna get the build here. Now, the build from the previous video, if you did watch the previous video, it's not going to change. It's going to stay the same. I just didn't want to have wrong information where, people were confused or whatnot from it. Okay, so the Kuva Nukor. Now, I'm going to go to a empty setup here. I'm going to go to empty setup here, and in the Kuva Nukor, you have innate elements that come on it. You have heat, and you have radiation. Okay, now you can also get a progenitor on this weapon, which is minus heat. The progenitors that you can get are one of the four basic elements, so heat, toxin, cold, electric, and then you could also choose radiation and magnetic. Now, one of the popular things that people choose for this weapon is the magnetic element. Now, I don't pick magnetic myself. I want my heat rating to be higher, so I pick heat instead. Magnetic is a good option for, there's basically two ways you can play the Kuva Nukor. You can play it as a melee primer, or you could play it like I'm going to play it and show it as a main damage source. So if you're playing it as a main damage source, you're going to want a high heat rating. And if you're playing it as a primer for your melee condition overload, you want to have magnetic. So the other thing about the Nukor is that it has like a secret element that doesn't show on this list, and it actually doesn't show up on the hey Hazel. And it actually doesn't show up on the weapon or on the procs, like on the enemies either. And that's called microwave. So, you have all these elements here, which is cool, but you also have that little element. As long as you're shooting an enemy, he's going to have that element. And I believe that element does not have a duration. It'll just last forever. So it's technically counted like for like galvanized shot or condition overload or whatever you're using. It's counted as a status effect on the enemy, even though you can't see it. So, okay, now to go over the mods here, we're going to be going with Galvanized Diffusion for multi-shot, Galvanized Shot for status chance and direct damage per status type affecting the target. Now, this is the mod I misspoke on. In the previous video that I did this morning, I had said 40% direct damage per status type affecting the target for ×3 at 120% damage at 3 elements. And in fact, it's 120% status per element. Okay, so it's a big difference between 4 elements here at 480% instead of what I said is 120. And that's why, even though the build is not changing, it's the same build I'm doing this morning, I just wanted to redo the video because I didn't want that like wrong information there. Next two mods here, we're going to go for crit chance, crit damage mods. Now, if you look at the Nukor, it is extremely low crit chance, but it's extremely high crit damage. Those are kind of weird stats. And it also has a really good status chance. But the crit stats here are really weird. So really low crit chance, really high crit damage. Base crit damage on this is 5 times, which is huge. It's one of the highest starting crit damages in the game. Now, if it did not have a high crit damage number, I would just straight up not even use crit. I would just take both of these off, throw them in the trash, maybe put some flat damage there. But, and I guess to go back a bit, this build is primarily a white non-critical with a little bit of yellow crits mixed in. So again, it's like, does it really justify Does it? Oh, it does. Yeah, anything that's going to increase your crit chance is going to pair well with this. Just remember, though, it's got a really low base crit chance. So, like, even if you get something that's like, oh, it's going to give you 300% criticals, like, it's going to be 300%, like, from 7% base. Like, so it's pretty... Crit chance is great on this, but anything you get that is crit chance is going to have a small effect. But we'll go over that small effect. So again, this is mostly a white non-crit build, but because the crit damage multiplier is so gigantic, it's actually it justifies and it's worth putting the crit mods on here because the few yellow crits you get are doing massive damage. And so if you can get, a Riven with crit chance, it's not going to bring you into full yellow crits. I don't think anything would really bring you into full yellow crits with this weapon, but it'll add some more yellow crits, and every time you get a yellow crit, this crit damage multiplier, triggers basically. Okay, so next mods are going to be Lethal Torrent for fire rate multi-shot. We're going to plop on Viral here, so cold and a toxin. Now, if you're playing Whispers content, just keep in mind, Whispers enemies are resistant to and immune to Viral. So Viral is a very bad element for Whispers content. So instead use like Corrosive. Corrosive would be perfect for Whispers. And then at the end here, we're going to be using Primed Heated Charge to increase our heat weighting. And then Ruinous Extension to increase beam length because, beam weapons are notoriously low range. So that just helps a little bit. And then in the Arcane slot, you have Cascadia Flare. Now, Cascadia Flare is going to increase our base damage by 480%, which is a huge flat damage increase. And most of the time on a lot of secondary weapons, even though Cascadia Flare is objectively better than Deadhead and Merciless, Deadhead and Merciless can get you up to 360%. I usually use Deadhead and Merciless because Cascadia Flare, the stacks are all counted separately, and they'll fall off very quickly unless you can pump out heat procs. And that's something the Nukor does really well. So you have no problem with the Nukor keeping your Cascadia Flare up. So using Cascadia Flare over like Deadhead and Merciless basically gives us another 120% flat damage that we get over them. The other option here, and thanks also again for the last comment. I took the video down because it was wrong information on that video. But one of the commenters there, Mike D, the one who told me about the mistake, he said, secondary Cucumber, or not Cucumber, Encumber, although I think Cucumber is a better word for it, is also a good option. Now, I tested secondary Encumber, and it's good. But just like so, you look at Galvanized Shot here. It's going to increase 120% damage for each status. That's good. So this one is 480. Just you're always going to be at 480. So for Cucumber to beat Flare, it's got to be giving you at least 5 unique statuses per target that are not your current ones. And when I was testing Cucumber out, it was frequently just giving me the same statuses. I mean, sometimes it would give me others. So like when I would kill an enemy, he would have like, maybe 4 or 5 or even 6 elements on him. But it's not enough for that to beat Flare out. Like he would have to give you 5 more unique statuses that are not these ones. So, and that's why we're going to stick with Flare, but it was a great suggestion. Secondary Cucumber is a good suggestion. And if you were going to go with more of the melee-focused Kuva Nukor, where you had like magnetic and you had other sources that were like doing other statuses and stuff, secondary Cucumber might beat out Flare, but I'm going to keep Flare on myself. Okay, so I think I've explained that pretty well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a 10-minute Kuva survival on Steel Path. We're going to kill some trash, kill some acolytes, see how it does. And then after that, we're going to do a Lua Conjunction on Steel Path, where enemies are a little bit stronger. So, okay. And again, we're doing this on something that doesn't affect weapon damage. That way we can just test the weapon itself. So we're going to be using a Big Dumb Inaros with no Archon Shards, no mods that affect weapons, no Arcanes that affect weapons, and with a pet with no Sentinel weapon and no mods on the pet that affect weapons. That way we can just test the weapon itself. Okay, I'm going to press my 4 to double my armor, and that'll be the last time I use an ability. And also, if I ever need to use an ammo pad during this run, I'll make sure I say so. That way you know I've had an ammo issue.
Predictable. As expected, Grenier have shut down environmental systems, sending modified life support capsules. Use these to sustain your environment or attach to the catalysts to begin harvesting.
Now, nothing on this build actually requires you to aim in. I have a habit with, I use like galvanized scope on a lot of my builds, so I just have a habit of always aiming in. But you technically don't need to. And as you can see, it's probably like 70-30, like 70-ish% white damage, and then like 30-ish% yellow crits. Yeah, absolutely, Hazel. Hell yeah. And again, this build, Hazel, is more about the like using the weapon as the actual damage source. If you're using this weapon as a primer to melee, it's going to be a little bit different. You would go for like a magnetic progenitor instead of a heat one. Just because with melee you want as many statuses as possible. Just because you basically have another condition overload mod on the melee. Use Zakuta Prime? Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. The other thing on the previous... So, I took down the old Kuva Nukor video because I had wrong information on it. But on that old video, we also had one of the commenters, and he comments on a lot of them, Cold Fries. He requested the Opticore. So I will happily do an Opticore video for Cold Fries. I'll do the strongest version of the Opticore, which is the Opticore Vandal. I always try to choose the strongest version of each weapon. You know, otherwise, it would be too many videos. There'd be like 5 videos on the Bratton. MK1 Bratton, regular Bratton, Bratton Prime, Bratton Vandal. I'm probably missing a Bratton part there. But yeah, I just choose like the strongest version. So on the Opticore, I'll pick the Opticore Vandal. The Akicore, oh, I love the Akicore. Oh my goodness. I actually recently built that one out with that Akicore specific mod that like kind of has like little tentacles or tendrils that like do damage. And oh my goodness, it's so strong. I try to like mix my videos up where like one day I'll do a really strong weapon like this one. This is a really strong weapon. And one day I'll do kind of like a mediocre weapon. So I might have to do a mediocre weapon tomorrow. And the Akicore isn't a mediocre weapon, so it won't be the Akicore. So we have Malice coming. He's the most dangerous of the Acolytes. So he's going to put a bubble on me. And he tries to get you to kill yourself. And what you got to do is you got to roll out of it, and you leave the bubble there. If you see that like green bubble, that's his bubble. He tries to get you to kill yourself in there. It's basically a mag bubble. It's pretty much like a mag bubble is what he puts on you. And he will recast it on me, so I am going to like be quiet for a second because it's easier for me to hear than see. Like right there. I almost killed myself right there. He's like the biggest culprit of killing people in Steel Path. Not because like of the damage he actually does, but he puts that bubble on people and people will end up killing themselves and not really noticing. Like, or being like, you know, whoa, why did I just die? And it, you know, it's because your Warframes do crazy damage. You know, if you've ever used like some of these like rocket launchers or sniper rifles that hit for like, you know, half a half a billion damage. It's like, yeah, you're hitting yourself in that bubble for 500,000 damage. But no amount of damage reduction is gonna stop that. You're gonna one-shot yourself. So, but it's a very like light green that's hard to see. So the way I tell is it has this kind of like wah 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 kind of sound that happens when he puts it on you.
Go to extraction.
And then for a Riven for this weapon, I mean, I know you can't choose like what you have on a Riven, but for stats that you might be wanting, I feel like it would be pretty basic stuff like crit chance, crit damage, and maybe not multi-shot. So like beam weapons are a little bit weird with multi-shot where they don't really get the full effect of it. They still get an effect, and it's still worth using multi-shot. But I would just wonder maybe on the Nukor if flat damage would be better than multi-shot. I don't really know the answer to that, but it's worth thinking about. Maybe the god roll for the Nukor is crit chance, crit damage, flat damage instead of crit chance, crit damage, multi-shot like it usually is. You can see that Eximus was at 300 stacks of heat. So you get a lot of your damage, especially on the big guys like Eximuses and Thraxes, through the heat procs. So very good at killing trash, very good at killing Eximuses and Thraxes. It's just Acolytes is where this struggles. This is not a good Acolyte killer. But it's okay for a weapon to be weak at one, niche aspect of the game. The Acolyte is just one enemy that comes out every like 5 minutes. Not a big deal. That's why you have like, your primary or your melee weapon or your Warframe abilities you can switch to. I want to show everything off with the weapon itself. That way, you can make your own decision on, like, oh man, that was really shitty against the Acolyte. Maybe I should do something else. Yeah, the way galvanized shot works is very confusing, and I didn't want to have that up and just like confuse people. I mean, I'm an LR4 and I still get confused by that friggin' thing. And you have a lot of newer players that I didn't want to have that video up and just confuse them more. So we got the Acolyte here. We're gonna backpedal. It's tempting to face tank the Acolyte because, he can just get good beams on him, but he will do a ton of damage. So I kind of just backpedal while I fight the Acolyte. Now, fighting the Acolyte, I think this is where, secondary Cucumber might beat out Flare, just because the fight is so long that you probably could get like every element on the Acolyte while you're fighting them. But I don't think it's worth putting secondary Cucumber just for the Acolyte fight. But it's worth noting. Inaros is a unique choice. Yeah. He's I'm not a huge fan of Inaros, but he's my weapon testing frame. Just because, like, I mean, if I really needed to, I could, like, I wouldn't do it in a stream, but, like, I could sit down here and, like, go AFK and go to the bathroom for, like, 30 minutes and come back and he'd still be here. So it lets me focus more on getting kills instead of like worrying about like using abilities to keep myself alive. I've also thought about like putting stagger on him, like maybe prime sure-footed or something, but I don't know if I want to do that. Like I want to show Like when I'm using AoE weapons, I want to show if I self-stagger myself. That way, like, the viewer can make their own decisions and be like, oh man, Salt friggin' self-staggered himself every other shot. I think I want to use Prime Sure-Footed. Where if I just always use Prime Sure-Footed, you would never get that information until you actually used it. And then you'd be like, oh my goodness. All right, so we're going to 10 minutes here. We'll see what we're at for kills. So 707. That is well above average. When I do these runs, average weapons usually hit at like 350 to 400 kills. I think when I did this same video this morning, this was at like 770. So pretty much the same. You know, this one was at 709. The one this morning was like 70-ish. So yeah, well above average weapon. Very good Kuva weapon. Very good against trash. Very good against Xmises and Thraxes. Kind of weak against Acolytes, but that's okay. It's okay to be weak against one thing. So we'll do a quick 10-minute Lua conjunction. Enemies in Lua conjunction are going to be a little bit stronger. They're going to be 180 to 200. And they're going to be mixed enemies. And then every 5 minutes, you're also going to get the pack of Thraxes that come.
Your weapons make music, and the enemy calls for
Alright, I'm going to kill these guys first, because the two Drac Masters always give me heartache. Stealing my weapon. Hate those guys. Okay. I'm going to cast my 4 to double my armor, and that'll be the last ability I cast. And if I have to use an ammo pad at any point, I'll make sure I say so. Now, for people that because I wouldn't want to have 2 Nukors. Like, if you wanted to have a direct damage Nukor build, and if you wanted to have a melee priming Nukor build, like, it's not really worth having one in heat and one in magnetic. Like, you can go for either, and they're about the same. So the heat one's going to be a little bit stronger for straight up damage. And the magnetic one, but the magnetic's still going to give you a bonus in direct damage because it's going to work with galvanized shot. So that magnetic is basically going to give you 120 flat. Now you already have a shitload of flat damage. You have like over, I think the way I have it currently set up is like over 1,000% flat damage. Yeah, you can get away with using one to go for both. Absolutely, that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, if you want to get one with magnetic and just kind of, you know, if you're more of a melee guy, but once in a while you use it for direct damage, just go with magnetic. Or if you're more of a shooty guy, but you want to have an option to use it for priming, go with heat. Like, it's not that big of a difference, both of them, but they will be slightly better in whatever they specialize in. I mean, I'm a completionist, but I'm not that much of a completionist to try to have 2 different Kuva Nukors. I don't want to be grinding that out.
If you have a Necrolec, this would be an excellent place to deploy it.
Oh, and I don't know if I went over what that magnetic status effect does, or not magnetic, microwave status effect does. It inflates the enemy when you shoot at it, and it also does a little bit more damage to the inflated parts, which is a little bit weird, but that's kind of what it does. Just think of it as an extra little bonus. You got an extra little status and enemies you shoot at. I don't think it's significant, like extra damage. It's just it's an extra status to give you another you know, damage source for galvanized shot. Yep, got my weapon stolen by a Drakmaster, of course. I hate these guys. So we're at almost 4 minutes, which means the Acolyte can come any second, and then the Thraxes are going to come in about a minute. They tend to come at about the same time, which is why, like, average or weak weapons struggle at the 5-minute mark on this one. Like that, I don't think that's the Acolyte coming. I think that's just Sentients coming in.
Sentient scouts. If they detect you, fighters will soon attack.
Alright, so we do have the Acolyte coming. We're going to try to kill him quick, within 30 seconds. That way we can fight the Thraxes. This is the guy that likes to turn into waves and fly past you. He's a little bit of an annoying one. Flew into a wave. Now, when the Thraxes spawn, we have to focus on Thraxes, because they're going to be sucking life support. In fact, I'm going to hit 1 life support here. So here we go with the Thraxes. I'm just going to stack as many. He's got almost 200 stacks on him. He's dead. That other Thrax actually died from the chain effect of the Nukor, which is really cool. Like, that's how strong the Nukor's chain effect is that I wasn't even purposely shooting at that second Thrax. And he was dead. Right, we can just focus on Torment again. I do have to keep in mind my life support. Torment is one of the more annoying ones to fight because half the time he's zipping around in his little wave. There he goes. I'm going to run and hit a life support real quick. Torment will follow me. So again, this is not the best Acolyte killing weapon. That is where this struggles. Alright, he is done. I'm going to kind of slowly bring these guys to the life supports. That way I can kill them as I backpedal to the big life supports. Because dealing with spawns in lieu of conjunction is the worst thing about it. Because the game will just not spawn extra enemies unless there are... there's like a maximum amount. Like the maximum amount right now has spawned on the map. So if I go over here, they won't spawn over here until the first group of enemies walks over. So it's a little bit annoying. So I'm going to hit like 2 of these, I think. And then I'm going to try to meet the pack of enemies in between so I can start trying to farm yellow life sports. At least I'm getting a few spawns here now, but the majority of the enemies still need to walk over from that side. A little bit annoying. And for some reason, they're extremely slow all the time to walk over. But yeah, Cold Fries recommended the Opticore Vandal. Now, I actually have an Opticore Vandal built out already, and I'll do a little bit more research on it just to make sure my build is proper and it's the correct thing. Because some of these builds I did like 2 years ago, and some things have changed. I've gotten smarter over the years, hopefully, and so sometimes the builds are not up to date. So I'll check the Opticore Vandals build. And that might be a good one. If I remember, it was like a mediocre weapon. It was not a strong weapon. It was a okay weapon. So that'll be good for an in-between of like 2 good weapons. And someone else had recommended the Amprex for one day. And Amprex, if I remember, it's another one I built like 2 years ago, so I have to just go over the build one more time, make sure it's a good one. But if I remember, the Amprex is kind of like a mediocre to good weapon. Like it's kind of in between being good and being medium.
Don't worry, I'll take very good care of Varuna. I have just the
And certain weapons are better on certain Warframes too. Like I don't play Gyre myself, but one of my friends plays Gyre, and they say the Amprex is really good on Gyre, which makes sense. You know, it's electric based. She's electric.
The queens have sought out Warframes before. Vor sought to present them with yours. We cannot let the worm have Varuna.
All right, so Thrax is dead. We're at the 10-minute mark. We're at 562 kills, which is kind of expected with Lua Conjunction, just because you spend a lot of your time fighting Acolytes and Thraxes, like bigger enemies, than Kuva Survival. So, but that's still well above average. 562 is still well above average. And I was expecting that. This is a very good weapon. Okay, we'll go back to the Orbiter and into the Arsenal, and we'll go over the build one more time. Okay, so Kuva Nukor. It's a secondary beam weapon. When you hit your target, it's going to chain to other enemies.
As ready as you will ever be.
The unique things about it is that it has radiation innate. You get a progenitor that you get to pick, one of the 4 common elements or 2 of the combined ones, magnetic or radiation. So I have heat, I have radiation. That'll be innate on here. I choose heat as my progenitor for this build. And then the other quirky thing it has about it is that it has like kind of like a secret status called microwave. And as long as once you hit an enemy, it has microwave on it. So, because there's no other way to tell if the enemy has microwave, there's no actual proc that shows up. But as long as you're doing damage to an enemy with the Nukor, it has microwave on it. So, the other quirky thing about the Nukor is its stats. So, really good status. That's not really too quirky. It just has really good status. But here we go. Here's the quirky thing. It's got really, really low crit chance, but really, really high crit damage. Like, really high. You know, it's 10.5 with my mod on, but it's 5 times base, which is huge. That's a huge buff. So because of that, you know, if the crit damage multiplier wasn't this good, I would throw these mods right off of here. I would just plop these right off. But the crit damage multiplier, microwave just puts them in a stun locky wave. Yeah. They kind of look like wavy. It inflates their body parts, and I believe it does a little bit extra damage to inflated parts. I don't think it's significant extra damage. I could be wrong, but The takeaway, though, of microwave is it technically counts as an extra status. So you get more out of galvanized shot. You get more out of condition overload if you're going for like a melee build. So it's really nice. It's really nice. That's why people use the Kuva Nukor as a melee primer, is because, you know, there are other weapons that you could put these same element mods on, but the Kuva Nukor starts with a combined element on it, and you technically had another element innate with the microwave ability. So like that's why people use the Kuva Nukor as a priming weapon for melee. So yeah, but going back to like the crit chance here, if the crit damage wasn't so good, I would plop these right off. Like these would be garbage. But the crit damage is so good that even though this weapon is primarily a white non-crit weapon, the yellow crits you get are justify putting these two mods on, just because you're going to get so much damage out of them. So crit chance, crit damage mods, lethal torrent for fire rate multi-shot, frostbite and pistol pestilence to make viral. And just remember, if you're playing Whispers content, enemies are resistant and immune to viral. So viral is very bad in Whispers content. So for Whispers, you're going to go with corrosive instead. So toxin and electric instead. And then at the end here, we're going to go with primed heated charge. That way our heat weighting is the highest, because we want our weapon to put more heat procs than anything else. So we have heat being the highest, viral being the second highest, which is perfect because viral only stacks to 10 and heat stacks infinitely. So we want our heat weighting higher. And then radiation's at 20, which we don't really care about radiation, like as far as the actual effect of it, but we care about getting at least one proc of it. That way we get more damage out of galvanized shot. So that's that. And now we have Ruinous Extension for beam length, because beam length helps beam weapons, of course. And then in our Arcane slot, we're going to have Cascadia Flare. Now, Cascadia Flare is going to give 480% flat damage. The other two that I usually go with for most weapons are either Merciless or Deadhead. They give 360% flat damage. But the reason on the Nukor specifically that I go with Flare is because normally Flare is hard to keep up, because Flare stacks are all counted separately, and like the second you stop doing fire damage, your stacks start falling off. But the Nukor pumps out fire procs like crazy. So it's super easy to keep Flare up. Even if you had Flare fall off completely at 0%, probably within like half a second, it would be back up to 480. So that's why Flare is perfect with the Nukor. It's no issue to keep Flare up with it. Secondary Cucumber is also an option. But it's for secondary Cucumber to be better than Flare. So let me just go over it just for people that don't understand. So on a status effect, you get a 25% chance, about a 25% chance, to trigger a second random status effect. Okay, so you don't actually get damage out of that. You get status effects, but here's where you get the damage out of it. You get the damage with galvanized shot. So you get basically 120% damage per status on the target. So Flare is giving us 480%. So for secondary Cucumber to beat out Flare, it's got to be putting 5 unique statuses on the weapon that's not already on the weapon. So we already have 3. So from my testing, by the time I'm killing an enemy, he has a shitload of statuses on him, but it might not. So what would that? It would have to have 5. So 8. It would have to have 8 visually seen statuses on the target for it to beat out Flare by just 120%. Past 8, it would be another 120%, another 120%, and so on. Most of the time when I'm killing enemies, they have a shitload of statuses, but it's usually not like 8. It's usually like 6, maybe 7. On enemies that stay up really long, like the Acolyte, for instance, I mean, Cucumber probably would be better because you would get a shitload of statuses on the Acolyte. But that being said, the Nukor is not really the best Acolyte killer. So I'm going to go with Flare. You don't really have to think too much about Flare. It's 480 all the time. But Cucumber is an option. It's just that I think Flare is going to be a little bit better. So, yeah, that's the Kuva Nukor build there. I think I pretty much went over everything there. I appreciate the commenter on the video. I ended up taking that video down, but I appreciate the commenter. His name is Mike D. And telling me about my mistake with galvanized shot there. So I thank him, And I do remember your comment, Cold Fries, about the Opticore Vandal, and I will have that video going out soon. I don't know if it's going to be tomorrow or if it'll be like another one of the days, but it'll be one of the days there. So I appreciate you guys watching. If you liked it on YouTube, give it a like. And thank you so much, guys. Have a good day.